Hi, welcome to session 3 of the RAW training. This is the RAW response to emotional difficulties. So we're just going to have a think first about what emotional difficulties mean. So if you can just spend a couple of minutes just jotting down on a piece of paper what you feel the term emotional difficulties mean and how this might present in a school or classroom setting. So today we're going to be focusing particularly on low mood, depression and suicidal thoughts. So there is a trigger warning with this. If you do feel that you need to step away for a few minutes to have a break, that's absolutely fine. They are tricky topics that we're going to be talking about. The reason why we're speaking about this is because 4% of children in the UK have some emotional difficulties that have been diagnosed, such as anxiety or depression. So the prevalence means it's really worth us speaking about this. Like with mental health, we're going to be looking at depression and low mood as a continuum. So we're all likely to be somewhere on that spectrum at some point, and that can change depending on generally how we're feeling and events that are happening for us or situations at that time. So we've talked about cognitive behavioural approaches in terms of anxiety in the last session, and we're going to be thinking about the cognitive behavioural therapy model for low mood on this slide. So I'm going to play a video first of all. It's a little girl in Liverpool that's in this film, and the reason why I'm showing you this one is because when a survey was undertaken of primary school children in Liverpool, they said that falling out with friends was the thing that created the low mood for them the most out of any other situation.
Are you having lunch? I'm not having lunch with you, I'm having lunch with Hayleyy. Why not? Because I'm not your friend anymore.
It's happening again. Why doesn't anyone want to be my friend? What's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me.
Table 12, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Table 13, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So we're going to be thinking about the little girl's experience in this video for the CBT model to see how her low mood has been created and how it's then maintained. So the adverse life event that we're thinking of is what you've just seen on the video. So it's a friend saying that they don't want her to be part of their group anymore. That then moves on to having a less rewarding life. So for this girl, she wouldn't be able to necessarily have a friendship or a peer group within school, which again makes her life and experience of school less rewarding and less desirable for her. That will then cause mood changes for her. So you could see when she's speaking to herself in the mirror, she was saying, why does this happen to me? Why is this happening again? That can then cause feelings of low mood. To try and manage feelings of low mood, the little girl may then try and put in place some coping strategies to try and deal with this. However, as we've explored before, not all coping strategies are positive things. We talked about safety behaviours on the previous session, but her coping strategy might be to, again, completely withdraw, to become very quiet, not to communicate with anybody. This then may cause additional difficulties. So, for example, if she becomes withdrawn in class, her teachers may become frustrated, for example, that she's not participating as much. She's also not given herself opportunities then to develop relationships with other peers. This again then reinforces her view that why is this happening again, I'm not good enough, and just reinforces that feeling of low mood. So you can see how some coping strategies may help to maintain these feelings of low mood and possible, over time, possible depression. So as we've just touched on, the things that people do when they're feeling low can reinforce their low mood. And in order to help a child with low mood, it's important to understand what their behaviour is when they're feeling low and how these behaviours make them feel. So I've, on the previous slide, given an example of a child withdrawing from a situation. You just spend a couple of minutes just jotting down other things that you think children and young people may do to help them to manage feelings of low mood that may not be particularly helpful. And throughout these sessions in the raw training, we talk about the iceberg model. So again, the only thing we see on the surface is the behaviour. We don't see everything else that's going on underneath. So it's important just to be aware of that when we're thinking about low mood. And it's important for us to think about, are the coping strategies or are the things that children and young people are doing, is that actually maintaining their low mood? And if so, how can we support with this? So in terms of how we can intervene and support children and young people when they're experiencing low mood, RAW provides us with some resources that we can use. So on the right, there is the mood diary. So often when children and young people talk about school and give a summary of their day, it's often quite negative. But it's important for us to try and reframe that a bit and encourage children to reflect on what were some of the positives of the day. Again, for us as adults, it's really hard for us sometimes to be able to do that as well. But just thinking about some of the positive aspects of the day just helps to challenge those thoughts, those kind of global thoughts that everything's going wrong. And on the left is the resilience challenge. So we've talked about the different resilience that's involved in RAW. This is a really nice worksheet in terms of thinking about resilience and helping children and young people to think of activities and things they can do to help their resilience and therefore help low mood. Because again, we've talked about resilience being bouncing back from adversity or challenges. So again, it's just helping children and young people to think through what they can do to help themselves in these situations. And it's worth being aware that I think professionals in the field that we're in, we do want to almost fix things for children and young people. We want to make things better for them because we want them to be happy. So it's coming from a good place. But sometimes we just need to be sad with them for a moment as well. We just need to show empathy and help children and young people to know that feelings of low mood, they are normal and that we can understand them. I'm just going to show you this lovely clip from the film Inside Out, which if you've not seen it, it's really worth watching. There's some lovely clips that you can use with children and young people as well. So I'm just going to show you this clip and then we'll talk through it.
Oh, the Stuffed Animal Hall of Fame! My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who is your friend who likes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I are going to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time. We had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
How did you do that?
I don't know. He was sad, so I listened to what...
Hey! There's the train!
Okay, so that clip's just a really lovely example of the way that sadness was able to emphasise the importance of sort of seeing how the other character's feeling, accepting what they're feeling, listening, validating, and not being overly directive in terms of giving solutions. So I just want you just to make a few notes. Again, just pause the presentation and just think about what it was that Sadness was doing so well. So think about times when she was able to accept what the other character's feeling, when she was validating what they were feeling. And also just maybe think about some of the pitfalls that Joy was engaging in, so the character at the start. So again, very well intentioned, but what were some of the things that she was doing to try and fix the problem that maybe weren't as helpful as what Sadness was doing? So sometimes children just need to know that what they're feeling is really normal, and that we as adults all feel these ways as well. We all feel these emotions. If you've accessed the emotion coaching training, you'll know that a lot of emotions are hardwired into us, such as feelings of sadness and feelings of anger. And it's okay to be feeling these things as well. But sometimes we just need to acknowledge that for children and young people and let them know that what they're feeling is valid. So sadness is a really normal emotion, and it's okay just to let it sit with us for a while. So as long as it passes through our minds, so we can experience it and then eventually let it go, rather than it sort of setting up camp with us and being something that's quite persistent. So we've talked a bit about sadness and low mood and how those feelings are really normal and we all experience it. And we have days, as you can see on the slide, we have days when we feel low mood, and this low mood then tends to lift after a while. It's worth then thinking about when low mood doesn't lift. So low mood that doesn't seem to go away, or if the symptoms that we'll talk through in a moment are present for more than 2 weeks, that can then start to be a sign of depression. So again, worth just putting a health warning in here that we're not therapists, we're not medical professionals that can diagnose, but it's worth, again, just being aware of some of the signs that may indicate when low mood is being persistent and when it's moving towards depression. So some of these signs may be when a child or young person is not getting any enjoyment out of life. Feelings of hopelessness is key as well. We've talked about hope being a real core component of the resilience framework, and feeling hopeless can indicate low mood or depression. Having a lack of energy and not wanting to do things that we've enjoyed doing in the past. Lack of concentration, so if you see a child or young person having difficulties focusing on their work, sometimes that can be an indicator. Having suicidal thoughts or thoughts about hurting yourself can also be a sign of depression. Appetite changes, so under or overeating, and that sort of emotional compensation. Feelings of tiredness, again, that sometimes goes hand in hand with lack of energy, and also can be associated with sleeping, so sleeping patterns, either sleeping lots and lots or not sleeping at all. And again, if we're thinking about that iceberg model, some of these might be quite hard to see with children and young people as well, particularly the feelings that we can't see, like the feeling of feeling hopeless, the thoughts that they may be having, thinking about thoughts about harming themselves, and again, sleeping, which we're not aware of as well. So it's important just to, again, think about linking up with parents during times like this, just to check in and make sure things are okay. And again, speaking to the child directly, which we'll come on to soon. So we are going to go on to talk a little bit about suicide as well, because it's really important for us to be aware of that this is happening. Often children and young people don't actually want to end their lives. They just want the situation that they're in at the moment to change. And again, it's worth just reinforcing that with children and young people, that things will pass and that situations do change as well. But just to understand a bit around suicide, so children and young people, as we know, have got lots and lots of things going on. So we've talked about the stress buckets in previous slides as well, and all those things that can go into children and young people's stress buckets. So some of the stresses might include pressures from school, at home, worries about the future, falling out with friends, and lots more. And young people who don't have any coping strategies or have very few for dealing with these stresses, and who have little to no support because support systems are key, sometimes feel that no one's going to be able to help them and that taking their own lives is the best way out. So in years gone by, it's worth just talking about the terminology around suicide and the discourse as well. So in years gone by, the term committing suicide was really common. It's really important for us to avoid that term now, because committing suicide implies that it's something that we've chosen to do to ourselves, or that it's the word committing used to come from it being what's considered to be an illegal act at the time. So again, we want to minimise that kind of stigma and any aspects of blame. So when we talk about suicide, it's not around committing, it's taking one's life or just suicide. And the risk of suicide is higher when a child or young person is depressed or when they have a serious mental illness. When they're self-harmed in the past, the risks of suicide do increase with previous times when they've self-harmed. If they've had a relative or friend who have tried to take their own lives in the past, this can increase the risk of suicide. If they've planned for a while about how to die without being saved, again, it's quite rare that we might come across this, but if we do, sometimes that can lead to an increased risk of suicide. If a child or young person, again, is feeling hopeless or if they're feeling worthless. If they've used maladaptive coping strategies when they've been upset in the past, so for example, using drugs or alcohol. And if they've made attempts to take their own life before, the risk of suicide associated is higher. Sometimes as school staff and professionals, we're really conscious not to talk about suicide with children and young people, sometimes in case it puts the idea in their head, but research has shown that this isn't the case and that it's okay to explore this openly with a child or young person, whilst being very sensitive at the same time. So asking open-ended and appropriate open-ended questions are a key source of information that gives us understanding of what's going on with the young person and the extent and depth of their upset and low mood as well. So some of the questions that we might use to explore this with children and young person, again avoiding the kind of direct, why do you feel this way, would be questions such as, have you ever had a thought of hurting yourself? Have you ever had thoughts of ending your life? And if so, have a plan to do this. And again, thank the child or young person for being honest and being brave. If you had one wish tonight when you go to sleep, what would it be? So again, it may be that the wish might be a positive thing, but it could be thoughts about waking up in the morning and, coming to the morning and then not being able to wake up. What would you say to your friend who was feeling this way? So thinking about a bit of externalisation for the child or young person and putting themselves in someone else's shoes as well. Often it's very difficult for us to be kind to ourselves, but the thought of being kind to somebody else comes more naturally. What thoughts pop into your head when you're feeling this way? So again, thinking of the iceberg model, exploring for the child or young person what's going on underneath the surface. Using some scaling can be really helpful. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how seriously do you feel about this? Again, we've talked about the thermometer in previous sessions, so that could maybe be used to explore the intensity of the emotion as well. Who else have you spoken to about this before today? So asking that question can help us also with joined up working with other professionals if they have spoken to somebody else or with parents. Or it helps us just to know that the child or young person may need to seek further social support. And asking clarification questions are really useful. So, for example, what do you mean when you say? And when we're asking these questions with children or young people, it's really important to keep safeguarding procedures at the forefront of our minds and think about safeguarding in terms of not asking leading questions, keeping an accurate record of what the child or young person says. So again, please do go back to your safeguarding procedures in school to see what we need to be doing in these situations. And remember to always thank the child or young person for being honest about how they're feeling. At the time, try not to panic yourselves. It can be really hard because there is transference there as well. But try and keep calm yourself. As we've talked about in previous slides, try and show empathy, validation, listen to the child or young person. And just keep trying to spot what is going on under the surface for the child or young person when they're feeling this way. And if you're working with a child or young person that you're concerned is having suicidal thoughts, we'll provide a safety plan that you can use with these children. So I think you can see on the screen there. So you can ask them to fill this in for when they are feeling very low. So this needs to be completed at a time when they're not in crisis. But it can explore aspects such as things that lead to bad feelings. How will I know when I'm starting to feel bad? And emphasising some of the positives. Why do I want to be alive? What will keep me safe? Where can I go to be with people? What do I need to help calm me down? Things that make me feel happy. Just spin this over. People I can contact if I'm struggling. And then things that can be quite powerful is someone that cares about me said. So again, having an outside point of view, just to help challenge some of these negative self-talk, negative thoughts, feelings of low mood. Having my favourite saying or lyrics can go in there. And this part here is a picture, I think, of the child or young person feeling safe, and then there's some helpful contact numbers there too. So again, this will be shared with yourselves when we're thinking about how to support a child or young person with low mood or suicidal thoughts. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of this session, so we're just going to go through the raw response to emotional difficulties. So again, R, recognising signs and symptoms. O, asking open questions and trying to spot the big thought. A, accessing support, services and self-care. And R, building resilience. So first of all, recognising some of the signs and symptoms of low mood, depression or suicidal thoughts. So children may seem teary, they might stop doing the things that they used to like doing. They may be easily irritated, have a lack of energy or disturbed sleeping patterns. Some of the other psychological symptoms that children and young people may have is the feeling of always feeling low, feeling hopeless, low self-esteem, feelings of guilt, lack of motivation or interest in doing things that they previously enjoyed doing, not getting any enjoyment out of life, difficulty making decisions, feeling anxious or worried, having suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. Some of the physical things that we may see are moving or speaking more slowly than usual, changes in appetite or weight, so this is often decreased, but sometimes it is increased as well through emotional eating. Children complaining about unexplained aches and pains. Again, lack of energy and disturbed sleep, which we can talk about with parents. And then some of the social symptoms might not be being able to focus properly in school, avoiding contact with friends, neglecting hobbies and interests, and having difficulties in home or family life. However, it's worth mentioning that low mood or depression may be really hard to spot, and I think we know this as well from being adults. We've all experienced periods of low mood, but there's very much this culture still of putting a face on it. So sometimes it's people who you would never expect to be experiencing feelings of depression or low mood that are sometimes most at risk of that. So it's really useful to be aware that our children and young people may be similar. So if you suspect a child or young person is suffering with low mood or depression, you should approach them in a warm manner and let them know that you've noticed this in them. It might be really hard for a child or young person to tell you and to understand what they're feeling themselves. So this is where they may need an adult support just to check in and ask how they're doing and if they need any help. And we can do this through asking open questions like we've talked about on the previous slides. So we can ask the child if anything has happened in their life that made them feel sad that they've been thinking about lately. And we can talk through quite openly with them about how these things might have made them feel. We can go on to ask them when they feel sad, what is it they do, what are their coping strategies? And it's important that us as adults look out for maladaptive coping strategies, so things that aren't going to be helping them. And making sure the child or young person knows as well that if this thing they're doing isn't helpful, that might be reinforcing some of the feelings of low mood. So we need to, again, always look out for the big thought, things that are going on under the surface of the child, and the big thing that's keeping the mood going. We can use the raw thermometer to assess how strong the feeling of sadness is. And again, don't be afraid sometimes to talk about suicide a little bit more openly, because research has shown it's not going to put the idea in the minds of children or young people. But again, work very closely with your school's safeguarding policy and any suicide policies that you have as well. In Bradford, as part of the Mental Health Champions, there was guidance around suicide for primary schools and for secondary schools too. So please feel free to contact me if you want any more information on that. This should be available somewhere online, or if you have a mental health champions professional in your school that have attended the training, they may have these resources too. And if you're really concerned about a child or young person, as I said, we're not medical professionals or therapists, so children can be referred to their GP or to one of the local CAMHS partnership services. So again, I would recommend just having a look at Bradford's local offer and see what's out there. We can encourage the child to complete a mood diary, which we've already talked about on previous slides, and noticing the things that make them feel happy or sad. And children that are presenting with anxiety as a result of low mood, if you go back to the previous session on anxiety, they can use some of the techniques in there too. And again, we've talked about sometimes it's not necessarily about intervening to change things for a child or young person. Sometimes it can be, but other times it is just validating and accepting and normalising what it is that they're feeling. just being there to empathise with the child or young person. We can encourage the child or young person to plan into their week things that they enjoy doing. And parents are key with this as well, so they could collaborate with school and coach them through this. And then the child should rate their mood before and after the activity, so they notice the positive impact of doing something fun that can have on their mood. So when we did this training, because it is quite a difficult session, we then took a step back and we made paper aeroplanes and we threw those and we rated our mood before and after doing the activity. And almost invariably, mood was higher because we've done something fun that took our minds off things. So again, that kind of activity can be used with children and young people. And parents or staff can reward the completion of these tasks in some ways, even with a sticker on the chart. So again, we need to be a bit mindful sometimes about doing too much in the way of behaviourist approaches in terms of rewards and consequences. But just helping the child or young person to recognise the strength in what they're doing, the fact that they've even been able to apply any coping strategies is a huge benefit and something they should be hugely proud of. So just reinforcing that in whichever way feels appropriate. And then the R is going back to building resilience. So in terms of children's basic needs, so talk to the child about the importance of getting enough sleep and how their mood is affecting the sleeping patterns. Make sure the child's diet includes enough nutrients and make sure they're also eating enough, particularly around lunch times as well. And exercise is key as well with feelings of low mood and depression. So encouraging the child to take part in sports, as this will increase their mood. So feelings of belonging, so asking the child to focus on good times and places and reflecting upon a time where they felt happy. What were they doing? Could they be doing this now? Learning, again we've talked about on the previous slide, reinforcing things that children and young people are doing really well. So highlighting the child's achievements, pointing out things they're doing well, talk to them about the good things you've noticed about them lately. It's worth just noting on this slide as well around praise in particular, that some children and young people feel quite uncomfortable being given praise, particularly public praise as well. It can make them feel quite anxious, or sometimes if they've got a negative self-perception, it's really hard to accept praise because they don't believe it themselves. So again, it's feeding these strengths back to a child or young person, which is appropriate for them. So you can reflect on this with children and young people and ask them how they're feeling about this. Coping, using humour can be quite powerful in terms of coping strategies. Again, it's got to be appropriately timed and it's not always going to be the right time. But trying to help the child or young person to have a laugh. So they can watch some funny videos on YouTube or talk about a time when they found something really funny. And again, that's not to minimise what children and young people are feeling. So again, thinking about emotion coaching, we want to validate what they're feeling and sort of the name it as well, being able to name it for them and helping children and young people to recognise this in themselves. But at the same time, we want them to find a joy in life as well. So using humour can be quite a powerful tool. And then core self, allowing the child or young person to know that you understand feeling this way must be difficult, but they're not alone and there's lots of ways you can overcome this together. So again, that's sort of saying that a problem shared is a problem halved as well, just making sure the child or young person knows who they can turn to and make sure they are still seeking social and emotional support. Okay, so on this slide, I'm just going to play this before we finish the session. It's called The Big Black Dog, which is a really useful way of thinking about low mood and depression.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
So a really powerful video there, I think, that shows that with the right support, things can get better, and it's worth children and young people being aware of this as well. So quite a tricky session, this one, to have taught through. So I'd say take a break after this, go and do an activity that makes you feel joyful, and thank you very much for listening to this.